We saw it after the killing of David Ames, that the media wanted to discuss anything other than Islamic extremist terrorism. You know, they wanted to talk about the online safety bill and civility in politics. And I feel like history is repeating. I mean, there was an actual car bomb outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday. We know the bloke who blew himself up should not have been here. I mean, why are MPs not talking about this?
It really is quite shocking. I mean, you just showed PMQs there, and we do have a situation now where a car bomb went off outside a women's hospital and no one in Parliament thought to ask a question about it or to raise it or even just to raise concerns about the fact that these kinds of things are happening. And as you say, this is a typical response now to terrorist acts, or to suspected Islamist terrorist attacks in particular. We just turn away. The media and politicians, they talk about it for a couple of days and then they forget about it. And we have to think about this fact. Over the past 4 weeks, an MP has been killed by a presumed Islamist terrorist, an alleged Islamist terrorist, and a car bomb has gone off outside a women's hospital, and people just aren't very heated about it or worried about it at all. And I think this muted, pathetic response to acts of terrorism is deeply worrying.
Well, you're completely right, because the media has been just as complicit in this conspiracy of silence. You know, 2 prime ministerial press conferences on Sunday and Monday after that bombing, not one question from the broadcast media to the PM about terrorism or the asylum system. And the asylum system, Brendan, is seriously flawed, and that's what resulted in this bomb. Imagine if hundreds of people had been killed. Are we going to have to wait for hundreds of people to be killed before we have this serious conversation?
You know, if you look at the problem of asylum seekers becoming terrorists, I mean, you know, it's not a massive trend, but it is a trend. And it is something that politicians
and it only takes one. It only takes one.
Exactly right. But, you know, we've had this guy outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital. The Parsons Green bomber of 2017 was an asylum seeker. The Reading stabber last year, who stabbed to death 3 gay men in a park in Reading. Lots of people have forgotten about that Islamist attack. He was an asylum seeker. Salman Abedi, who blew up Manchester Arena and killed 22 people, including young girls. He was the son of asylum seekers. He was the son of people who were given refuge in this country from their original country of Libya. So this is a problem. And I think a lot of ordinary people are asking themselves, why can't politicians get a handle on our borders, on controlling our borders? And when we see the outgoing head of the UK border force referring to bloody borders and calling them a pain in the A word, then I think we get the impression that even people who are supposed to be in control of our borders can't really be bothered to do the job. So lots of people will be worried about this, and they will be particularly worried about the inability of our political class to take the problem of Islamist terrorism more seriously.
Of course, of course. And look, the point is, Al Swilmeen, who obviously, thank goodness, was such a moron that he was only able to kill himself on Sunday. But he wasn't meant to be here. You know, he lied right from the start, Brendan, about his country of origin. Authorities believed he was Jordanian, but he claimed he was from Iraq or from Syria. But it's the process. The process is so flawed that he was allowed to remain here for 7 years. We were paying, taxpayers were paying for his rented accommodation at a hostel. So then he actually used all of the money from his part-time job to go and set up a bomb factory down the road. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. And these are facts, and they should be being talked about.
Exactly right. And, you know, there are also reports that he had mental health difficulties. He did something with a knife. He was found to have committed certain misdemeanors, and yet he was still in the country. And you do ask yourself, what does it take for someone to be deported these days? And you know, the issue is, I've always been in favour of a fairly liberal immigration policy, but it has to be done legally. It has to be done properly,
and
it has to be done with and it has to be done with the consent of voters. But this system that we currently have, where the UK border force doesn't seem to care very much about borders, where politicians can't get a handle on the people turning up here illegally every day, and where we can't deport people who are a potential threat to the country, that is just a system that is utterly out of control. And it's deeply worrying to the nation more broadly, I think.
No, I'm completely with you. And I hate it when people say that, oh, if you question why illegal migrants are here, you're somehow opposed to legal immigration. Actually, I would argue that this flawed asylum system and the continued inability by the government to stop the boats, I would argue that that actually makes a mockery and undermines our legal migration system. And that's why we have to keep talking about it. And I'm very glad that you have done so tonight, Brendan O'Neill.